All right, welcome back. We are COMP1011, Advanced OOP with Java in the summer 2022 semester at Georgian College, and it's week 5, part 1 of our broadcast and recording. And let's talk about a couple things that happen because there's always like hiccups that, don't go according to plan. So let's talk about those things really briefly, and, it is what it is. So last week we talked about strings, different methods for strings. We're going to use some of them today. We talked about regular expressions. We didn't really do a technical example for regular expressions. We did do this part last week. We actually built a table view. That's what we did. We talked about how to do that. And we also read from the database, and we used the DB manager singleton class to do that, the one we built the previous week. Stuff that was due, but there was some issues. We got to talk about those issues. My bad. I released assignment 1, but there was things that were missing from it, and assignment ICE4 also was due last week. However, we moved all this. I've moved it all over to this week, so that way you can still submit the stuff if you haven't had a chance to do that. I've opened up the Dropboxes and all that kind of stuff, and it's my bad, so it's always me that's going to move things. It's not going to be you that's going to take a hit in any way. And that's how it goes. And as part of the creation process that I can only thank you for your patience for the way things are going. I want to make sure that you guys get the appropriate content, and sometimes it takes a little longer to create. So bear with me while we're going through this. I think you're still going to have all the information you need for the midterm, which is what I'm working towards with all of these lessons that we're doing together. So that's where I'm going. So again, you'll notice that these things have been moved. We're sitting at, from a course evaluation, assignment 2 is supposed to be due next week. And again, what we're doing with assignment 2 is you're just filling in the data from the database using the methods that I've been talking about in class. Your in-class exercises actually are helping you with the data that you're going to put into the database, because I'm showing you exactly what you would do for the most part. I know there's some things that are missing, but some of those things is for you to do. So it's not everything that I'm doing. It's, you do some of it as well. But I don't think it's like wacky out of control in terms of everything else you got to do. We're sitting at week 5, again, the week of June 6th, and ICE5 is due this week. And some stuff that we're going to be talking about this week are Javafx Charts. We're going to be creating a chart view because, again, this is part of your assignment 1. As well as I'm going to be showing you how to do scene changes with Fxml. We're going to talk about this a little bit. And stuff that's due, again, is, I just want to put this out. It's due, assignment 1 now is due Sunday at midnight. And I think I made assignment 4 and 5 due Saturday. Or maybe I made assignment 4 due Saturday and assignment 5 due Sunday. But the lab reports for these are there. The lab report for this one is still not there, but I've extended it to Sunday because I have to make this work with assignment 2. Bear with me. Bear with me. If I don't do it, remember that it's on me, not on you, which gives you more time to do everything that you need to do. Hopefully you've got most of this done. I know most of you have it done because you've emailed me and you connected with me and all that stuff. So I don't think it's going to be a big leap for us to go from assignment 1 to assignment 2 in terms of all the functionality that we're looking for. Any questions around this, concerns, or anything like that, please bring them up now. I want to make sure I address them so that you guys are all good to go. If you're good, thumbs up. If you're not, let me know. I'm not really getting any responses, so I don't know. Hey, there's some thumbs up. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. All right. So again, not perfect execution, but it is what it is. And it's my bad. But the thing is, guys, I'm just trying to make it better for you guys. That's what it comes down to. Let's talk about some stuff, technologies we're going to need for today. All right. And one of the technologies then that we're going to need is Javafx Charts. There's different kinds. Not yet, no, Sarah. And the reason for that is because Sarah's asking if it's ready yet. The reason why it's not ready is the one thing that's missing is the lab report. And I've got the lab reports done for ICE4 and ICE5. Those are done. So you can after today, you can submit your ICE4 and ICE5, no problem. But I want to make sure that assignment 1 is good. And I want to make sure, I know, it's just so funny. And assignment 1 is got some issues. I want to make sure that it's it's perfect. And the reason for this is because people have asked all kinds of questions and they said, Tom, I don't get it, what to do with assignment 1, and I want to make sure I clarify those things. So that way there's no, there's no just kind of confusion, and everyone gets good marks, which is what I want. I want everyone, because this is, I think, is a straightforward assignment, building stuff with scene builder and UI. So I think that's the main thing for me. Okay. Well, we're going to do Javafx Charts today, and one of the things we're going to be doing with Javafx Charts is we're going to display the data in a different way, but we need to do some modification to our data and also to our Vector2D class in order for us to fit the mold of what we're trying to do. And I'll talk about this in a second. We have different entities that we want to display the data of. So far, we've displayed everything in a table view. How do I change that to a chart view? And what data am I going to be displaying? Right now, I only have Vector2D points, so data points, kind of X and Y coordinates. I could display those in the chart view, but I think it's best that we display something else. We're going to talk about that in a bit. So again, different kinds of charts that are available for us for JavaFX. One of them is some kind of pie chart. Again, this is up to you if you want to use a pie chart for your assignment 1 or 2. It wasn't required. In your assignment 1, I showed you a XY chart. That's what it's called. An XY chart is, in this case, is a bar chart. The XY chart, so-called, is because you have both X and Y data. So data around, kind of across the horizontal axis, and data around the vertical axis. So that's why it's called an XY chart. An XY chart, creates 2 series, and I'll talk about those in a second. So the mapping happens between the 2 series, and it's plotted in the chart itself. So that's what we're going to be building today, an XY chart. There's other kinds of charts as well, but these, I believe, are probably the 2 most popular ones that you could see. Okay, XY charts don't have to be in a bar. They could also be in other types of representations, some kind of scatter plot or other kinds of plots that you can use as well. But for the most part, it uses the XY chart series class, which we're going to talk about in a bit. So again, there's 2 axes we want to worry about today. One of them is the category axis, and the other one is the number axis when we kind of display data in a chart. And when we instantiate an XY chart series, so this is actually the thing we're going to be instantiating today, XY chart series. A series, when we talk about a series, represents a set of information or data for a type of entity. In our case, it's for the Vector2D points that we've kind of put together. Okay, so very straightforward. And also an entity is kind of the thing or the whatever the object is that we want to show the data for in the graph. And let's take a look at the data and how that data is going to look. It would look something like this. If I was going to create a series in Java, it would the syntax would look something like this. It would be XY chart, that's the actual object, series, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to use kind of this collection. It's almost like a pairing with a string for the first part of the series, that's the x-axis, and a float for the second part of the series, which is the y-axis. So this is x and y, so-called, on the x and y chart. Now you can adjust any kind of data you want for these 2 things. I'm going to use a string and a float in this case because we have a string for the x and y coordinates, right? We can get that from toString method. And what we want to do is name it something. For us, what makes sense to me is we're going to display the magnitude of each of the vectors in the chart. So the magnitude, when we look at math, I'm sorry to be mathy, but I have to talk about math a little bit. When we look at math, I look at a vector, x, y, or z, let's say a vector 2 or a vector 3 or even a vector 4, magnitude is expressed as pretty much the distance and direction from the origin. So if the origin is 0, 0, and if I have a vector that's 10, 10, the magnitude is calculated from the origin to that vector point. That's the magnitude of the vector. So that is what we want to display for each of the Vector2Ds that we've kind of put together in our data right now, right? So that's why I called it magnitude. And then when it comes to adding data to this series, so first we create the series, we instantiate it with a new keyword, we make a new series. The series is going to have a pair of data, so data points, string and float, for both the X and Y coordinates. And this is going to create a relationship between the X and Y coordinates. That's how it's going to work. And then to add data to the series, if we wanted to do it manually, we would do it something like this. We would say, hey, magnitude, get the data object that's embedded inside of the series. And then I want to add a new XY chart data. And then here's an example of some data that you can add in. So here would be the string part, and this is the actual data part. That's how it would look when we add data to the chart, okay? So I don't want to talk about too much more than this. Let's do it. And we have some modifications to do today in order for us to make this work, because our data, our Vector2D, does not include a magnitude method at all, right? So that's something we need to modify. So to start off, like always, let's go to what we had last week, create a new project, and start from there, okay? Let's do that. So let's do it. So again, last week, if you notice, we had ICE4. I'm just going to make a brand new project here called ICE5, right? Let's do that. So I'm going to pull up IntelliJ. Here's IntelliJ. Let's make a brand new project. Do it with me, guys. I'm going to call this, again, just like normal, COMP1011 in the summer 2022 semester, and it's ICE5. And of course, I want to look inside of the COMP1011 folder for me. I'm going to change this back to what it should have been last week. It should have been ca.georgiancollege, right? That's what it should have been. And I definitely want to use OpenJDK 18 or Java 18, which is what I want to use from now on because it matches with the version of Javafx. This is the one we want to use. It'll cut down on some of the errors that some of you are getting. Okay, so please use this one. Again, this is kind of where we're going to start like normal. When I click next, it's going to give us some options, which we're going to ignore. I'm going to create, which is going to create my structure, just like normal. And what I want to do here is, just like last time, I'm going to go into the folders that are containing this information. So I'm going to grab the hello application, hello controller, and the hello view, and I'm just going to delete them. Okay, so this is what we did last time, and we're going to probably do it every time we get together because we're building, you know, our structure from one week to the next, and I want to make sure that you guys kind of are building as opposed to making something brand new. All right, so we did that. We deleted everything. Is what we did. And now, of course, we need to import the stuff or copy paste the stuff in our operating system. So again, I'm going to kind of go back here and I'm just going to bring up two of these. So two file explorers, kind of what I do. One of them is ICE5, where I'm going to go into the source main Java CA Georgian College COMP1011 M2022 ICE5 folder. And then the other one, kind of the same, where I go into ICE4, where I've copied the stuff from last day. That's what I'm doing. So going in here and grabbing all this. So these are the files I'm copying. I'm not dragging and dropping. If I drag and drop them, then this stuff is goodbye, right? We don't want that to happen. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in here. So you can see it's both. Some people did some weird stuff where they deleted things, and I've had some conversations with some students that were like, well, now my ICE3 doesn't work anymore. Well, you probably moved stuff over, and that's why it doesn't work. So that's one thing. And then let's go back to main resources. This is the other one we want to change. So we had some stuff. We also made an icon last day. People asked us to make an icon. Because you know what, they're like, I want to add an icon, or no, I don't know how to add an icon to the application. I showed you guys how to do that with a quick lookup, but that wasn't very difficult at all, as we found. And I'm just going to go back into the resources folder here on the left-hand side, grab all this stuff, copy and paste it into the resources folder, and we're almost there in terms of what we need to do. I'm going to keep this open because we need some other things we need to copy, just like last time. So now that we go back here, if everything goes well, you should see all of these files, and they're all red. One of the reasons why they're red is because we haven't added them to Git. Let's always add for this one, which turns them all green, but they have an issue. And the issue is that the package is wrong. So if I pull up the first one, you can see that the first thing is it's ca.georgian. It should be ca.georgian college in this case for this week. And it's called ICE5. So that is the new package that we're using right here. Okay. And I'm going to grab this, copy it, and go into the other files and switch them out. So just change that package. That's important to do. I'm going to switch the packages for all of them. Okay, like so. And I'm going to go through all of these things to make sure that all the packages are correct. There's still some issues, but that is the first piece. App.css doesn't really need to change. We did some very simple stuff with app.css last week. We can do more of this week. And we don't have to change this right now because this is all correct except for this part, which is the path. So it's going to be Georgian College, and this will be ICE5, and that should fix the path for the calculate Vector2D distance. We're going to actually monkey with all of these things because we need to make some adjustments, as you'll see. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm just changing the path so that they're all good to go. And then I'll do the same thing with my Vector2D table view. Again, all I need to do is switch the path out for the package, right? So again, it's ca.georgian college, right? And it's ICE5 Vector2D table view controller, right? Things that are still missing, right? There's stuff that's still missing. There's two parts that are missing. What parts are still missing? So even though I've done all that, there's still red happening. What's missing? What's wrong? What do I need to do still? There's still some stuff that's missing, and I need your help, guys. Help me out here because this is going to help you with troubleshooting your issues. Then Daniel says, add Java SQL to the module info. Absolutely. That's the first one we do. So if I look at module info, we want to require java.sql. That's the first part. And let me undo that change for a second. Make sure you don't delete this part by accident, which I almost did. Java.sql. So sometimes what happens is when you add stuff in here, by accident, you delete this part, okay? If you delete Sql dependency, well, we know what that is. Thank you for that, Daniel, again. If you go to the POM.xml, here's the POM.xml, we want to scroll down to the dependency area. And I can't remember the dependency. We can look it up, but we also have this thing open over here, this other, the older project, which we can get. So if I go to source, and if I keep going back to the project, you can see that here there's POM.xml, which I can just edit. And if I just edit, it brings up this notepad. And if I scroll down, all I need really is this part right here, which is the dependency for MySQL. And that's the one I want. I'm going to copy it. And I'll put that in the chat for you, so that way you know what that is. That is the dependency. And we're going to put that in here. And then also, Guillermo says, make sure we add Maven Dependencies. Yeah, we're going to do that. Once we've added this dependency inside of POM.xml, we need to go to Maven and we need to refresh. So these are all the sequence of things we need to do to make the project workable again in the new folder without us losing any data and all that kind of stuff. So let's do that. So if I was to run this right now, well, I may have a problem. And why? Because what I needed to do for this demo is I needed to add a magnitude column right to the data. So here's what I did. What I had to do was I had to alter the vectors table. Let's do this now before I run the project, please. Okay, and I'll talk about why, because I had to alter the data right here. I could drop this column as well. I could alter the table, right, and I can remove the magnitude column, right? But what I want you guys to do is exactly this code, which is I want you to use the table for our example today, and I want you to alter the table of vectors, which is what I did, to add a magnitude column that's of type float. That's what I want you guys to do. And what we're going to do is if you want to change the data, here is some examples of some data. What I did was I used a calculator just to calculate some of this data so that it computes. For the most part, the magnitude, again, remember, is the distance between the origin and the vector point, and that's what we need to put in here. Okay, so please issue this command in MySQL database, the MySQL workbench, and then start adding data. And the way to do that is to double click here and then add some data in here. Even if it's wrong for now, it doesn't matter for me. What matters is that it's around approximately right. You can see that I've got some data points in here right now. And I'm going to show you what to do to add new ones. Okay. The alternative is to delete everything. So delete everything except for the first vector point, and then we'll add new data afterwards. But you need to have the magnitude table, for whatever reason. Okay. Now this is what happens when we change the schema. So what we did was we had an original schema that only had vector ID X and Y, but we never had magnitude. We never cared about it. But suddenly now we do. So once you change the data, you need to click apply down here. Once you've added the table or the column, then you added data to the column, we need to click apply in order for it to take effect, right? Otherwise, what's going to happen is the data will be, well, it won't work. It won't be actually added in. So let's do that now. So please, when you're done modifying the table, for our example, by using the alter table and add magnitude kind of directive, then please let me know. So let me know when you're done, because I want to do this before we try and run this stuff over here. Because if I was to run this now, it still will work. Like if I go to main, okay, just as an example, here's main. And if I was to run this, right, so here's where I run main for a second. Let's run main. It should be okay, but we have extra data, as an example, but there's going to be some data that's missing, and it could potentially cause some kind of weird special effects, which we don't want. Side effects is what I like to say, right? So this is what we should be getting right now, which is what we had for the most part last day, with a couple more pieces of data, because I added some more data today, and we're going to add even more than this. There should be some mock data that's in the database for you. Okay. So when you're done, let me know that you're done. Please say done or whatever, that you've added the data, modified your table so you can follow along. Okay. Daniel's good. Nitin says this part was not working for me. Okay. So Nitin, what do you mean by that? When you say the part was not working for you, you couldn't load the data? Is that what you're saying? Yes. So the workbench, here's the workbench. So remember that the data that we showed, and let's just refresh the columns here. The data now has 4 columns. There's 4 columns, not just 3. Vector ID, right? X, Y, magnitude are the 4 columns, and I used this little SQL query to create the extra column, these 2 lines here. I'll copy paste those into, so I actually I copy pasted them into the chat. There's your chat for this part. And then I'm just selecting it so I can show what that looks like. And once I show the data in MySQL Workbench, you can literally just double click anywhere, any cell that you want, and modify the data that's in the cell. If you want to be accurate and want to have what I have, you can certainly do that, but it's not really that important right now. It's just some data that we can display in a table from the database. However, if you really want to, and you want to use the exact same data, you can certainly copy this. Take a screenshot, guys, of my screen, and then you can add the data in so your data looks like my data. But you need to have this information inside of the database on MySQL Workbench. Some people are having issues with MySQL Workbench. Okay, some people are using other things. I know that there are some people that are using Zamp, right, as an example, or MAMP if you're a Mac person, or WAMP even if you're a Windows person. They've used other things, other tools. It doesn't matter to me which tool you use to house your MySQL database. This is not a database course, okay? This is a Java course. So if you get your database, it's a MySQL database, and it's sitting in on a Zamp server, locally on your machine. Here, I think MySQL Workbench is the easiest to install if you do it properly, but there's other things you can use as well. Let's talk about those extra tools, because I know people are having other issues. So Zamp is also another option you can use. So Zamp. I think Zamp is a pretty good one because it's a local server that you can use that supports all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So it's pretty cool. Zamp for Windows, Zamp for Linux, Zamp for Mac. It's cross-platform, which is pretty cool. and it does everything you need to do for the most part. Now, the setup is different than in MySQL Workbench, but the operation of the connecting to the database is very, very similar. Okay, so just to let you know how this works. There are some things you need to look up to make sure that this works. All right, but at the end of the day, it could work that you're using Zamp or something else. Would I accept it? Yes. If you displayed this in your video and you talked about how you couldn't make things work for you when it came to to using MySQL Workbench, I'm okay with that. I'm flexible in that way. Some people also use some kind of online tool. They want to use an online database. It doesn't matter to me how you connect, as long as you display your data when you're doing your video and it looks right. That's most important for me than anything else, as long as it's your data and no one else's. All right, so that is a couple of options. So Zamp is an option, but you need to have some kind of data, and it should now, at this point, you should have at least 4 columns. Okay, that's what I'm looking at that. Daniel says, are we supposed to have that apply button clickable once we run the SQL command? Once you run all of these and you actually go through here and modify all this, yes, the apply button should be clickable. Okay, if you actually change something. All right, so that's something that should be allowed to do. At least mine does that, as an example. So again, if I wanted to change the data on vector ID, let's say my third record here, 1, 2, 3. And if I change the data here, instead of 30, 40, 50, let's say I wanted to make it something like 50.1, right? And I wanted to change that. And in order for it to take effect, I need to click apply. And then that would just say, here's the update. It'll actually run a little query for me. And it'll update where it says, update this database, vectors table, and set magnitude to 50.1, where vector ID is equal to 3. This is kind of like a search that you can do just like that. And if I click apply, then it's done. And if I do a refresh, so if I refresh the table data, you'll see that 50.1 is the one that's there. It's not accurate, actually. It should be something like, and it should be null because there's nothing in there. You've made a table that's empty, and now you got to enter some data, right? Or sorry, you've added a column that's empty, and you should add some data, because without that column, we're not going to have a chart. We need that column, right? Okay, so that is why we've done this, and if you haven't had a chance to do that, please do so now. Okay, but actually you'll see that we can probably get along without it. I'll talk about things that we can do, not even to have this data here, but we can generate it with just the X and Y coordinates as well. All right, so we've got our vector data. That's awesome. And notice that mine still says on there's no data magnitude here. We need to change our calculate Vector2D distance table to show the data. That's one thing we're going to do this today, as well as other things. So that's what we have from last day. Okay, let's put this up on GitHub, because what we have is some new stuff, and let's go up on GitHub to take a look there from what we had last day. So some people had some questions, and they're like, I didn't get your code or whatever. Remember that if you want to compare my code to your code, you can always go to Georgian College, so github.com/Georgian College, and then you're going to see the active repository from last week. So there's ICE4. It's literally, you can follow along. Everything I have in there will satisfy all the requirements that you need for ICE4. Let's make a new one for ICE5. So new. And again, just like last time, it'll be COMP1011 in the summer 2022 semester, and it's ICE5. I'm going to make it public, but you would make yours private at this point, and then include me. Again, when you're including me, make sure you include my last name at hotmail.com. Some people are still, for whatever reason, sending it to the other Tom, which is not the right one, and then I won't be able to see it, and I can't mark you. So create repository, and when I do that, it's going to give me some steering instructions. All right, so that's what the repository does. Remember, the repository is just an empty container at this point. Okay, so as a review, let's go back here and use our terminal to make sure we get all those things right. So again, lots of ways to create your repository. Remember that Git is always initialized here. I just need to do git add dot, right? We can do that. And then git commit -m, and I'll say added project files for ICE5, which is what we're doing here. And then what I want to do is get those 3 lines of code from GitHub. So I'm going to go back down to GitHub and grab these 3 lines of code here, right? And then right click and paste, which should paste all the code in here to connect my remote, my origin remote to the project, and then also allow me to push my stuff to GitHub. And that's what I recommend you do. I think it's a better way to use the command line, but you could also use these tools up here or even an external tool. Guys, I really don't care how you connect to GitHub and put it up, as long as it's up there and you can show progression in your code. So that's important to me. Let's refresh. You can see now that this is the GitHub link for this week. And I'm going to grab this link and you can kind of put that in there. So there's the GitHub link. There it is. So again, I'm going to push, but if you need it, and if you're having trouble following along, or if I'm going too fast, you can always go there and grab that. And that could be a good starter actually right there. If you want to grab this link right here as a starter for your ICE5, that's okay too, right? It's just, that means you have to change some stuff up to make it work. All right, so that's the GitHub link. That's awesome. And what we want to do here is do this chart stuff. But before we get into that, we need to modify what we already have. So we want magnitude, remember? I want to be able to have magnitude, but my Vector2D, my poor little Vector2D, doesn't have any magnitude. So here's a couple of options, and I want to talk about them with you. You guys are developers like me, right? And what I want to talk about is, and let's discuss this so we're clear on what's happening. Should I, if I want to make a property to return a magnitude, there's a couple of options. One of them is I could create a private float. Here's an option. This is in my Vector2D class, a private float that is going to be called m_magnitude. Okay, here's the private float. And then what I could do is I could generate getters and setters for this, okay? This is an option, okay? But I want you to tell me, here's generate. Let's say generate. I could do that too. But remember, this is per vector, Guillermo, per vector. If I do getter and setter, here's something that I could do. I could generate getter and setter for magnitude. And here they are. Here's my getter and setter. And these getters and setters, I want to put them in the right spot because I do my private instance members first. And then down here, below my constructors, I have my public properties. And you can see that I have get, set x, set y, all that kind of stuff. And, what I want to do down here is let's also put in those 2 getters and setters, getter and setter for get magnitude and set magnitude. Well, of course, it's going to be called, let's rename it. So it should be called something like get magnitude. And this should be called set magnitude. There's get magnitude, set magnitude, right? That's what we have there. And this should probably be renamed magnitude. Should be. This is magnitude as well. Okay. And sure, I could do this. But then how the heck do I calculate magnitude? Right? I mean, I'd have to either do something like that calculates the distance from the origin. Wait, calculate the distance from the origin. Well, that means that I want to use the utility function because we already made that thing happen, right? We already did that stuff. So let's go to the utility function, and then sure enough, you can see that it's a singleton, and we have this distance calculation thing right here. So we could use this distance method. Okay, let's do it. So back into the Vector2D, I could say something like, when I get the magnitude, what I want to do is I want to calculate the distance. I could say that m_magnitude then is equal to, hey, utility class, I want to go through your instance method, and I want to use the distance. There's 2 overloaded methods. I could use distance where I could do kind of a Vector2D, or I can use x1, y1, x2, y2 as another option. I want to use this one. And I'm going to say that I want to make a new Vector2D, and I could pass in the origin. Okay, so this is something I could do. That's the start. And I can do, instead of a new Vector2D, I could just pass in this, right? Because that would be, because I am in a Vector2D, right? This whole class is a Vector2D. And distance, the distance method, this distance method that's been defined inside of my utility class right here, it requires a Vector2D. And because, well, I am in a Vector2D, then this represents a Vector2D. So therefore I could pass this Vector2D inside of here, and they would satisfy the requirements of the distance method. And then what it's going to return is a float, right? That's going to be held in the magnitude private, the magnitude private member. I could do this, okay? But then we get into some semantic issues. And I want to talk about this. This is the start of what I want you guys to do, for sure. But I want you to think about this now. Really think about it, okay? If I want my method, this thing, I'm going to use this thing to calculate the magnitude, let's suppose, right? I mean, a couple of things, a couple of problems might arise. One of them is I'm dependent on the utility class. That's fine. It's a utility class. Maybe it has other methods. Maybe we want to use other distance kind of methods there as well. And maybe if I want to build a vector 3D instead of a 2D, it's also going to have a distance method that takes X, Y, and Z. I don't know, right? And so it looks best to be put into a math class or a utility class or something, potentially. But the problem is that, why am I storing this thing anyway, right? Why am I storing it? Because I'm calculating it. There's my computed, distance. My distance from the origin is my magnitude. That's what the thing is. So storing it is kind of useless. It's absolutely useless. Why? Because, well, if I get the magnitude again, I might as well recalculate it. Why? If I change the X and Y coordinates, if I was to change the X and Y coordinates, I'd have to recalculate the magnitude. So if I can do a set X and set Y, really, if I get the magnitude, then I need to recalculate every single time. If I'm recalculating every single time, there's no need for me to store it, which means, my friends, that get magnitude becomes a computed property. Okay, here's a computed property. Computed property. A computed property is not a property where I'm storing a data member. Okay, I don't need to do this. This is a waste of memory in many ways, right? What I really want to do is really just this. So I want to take this and I want to put this here, right? And I want to get rid of this. That's what I want to do, right? And up here, instead of storing it, I don't need to do this at all. I don't need to have this thing. I can just get rid of it. And I'm never going to set it. That would be weird too. Why would I set a magnitude? I want to calculate the magnitude every single time. So really the setter, which is part of this whole pair, getter and setter, would be useless, right? It's really a read-only property, right? So it's a computed, let's put this out like this, read-only property. That's why we have properties and methods. We don't need an actual property to do this. We can just be a computed property. Does this make sense? So this is what we want to do. So get magnitude, actually, it returns the distance, but we set up, it's a convenience method, if anything else, where we set up the distance from the origin to the distance of this vector itself. That's what we're doing, whatever that vector is, whatever the X and Y coordinates are. Okay. Great. Let's put this up on GitHub. So again, we're going to go back to terminal and we're going to do git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say modified Vector2D to include magnitude computed property magnitude. Okay, git push. So I'm doing this in preparation for what we're going to do, right? We remember that we're going to think about adding a magnitude to our data table, right? That's what we're going to do. Whenever we add X and Y coordinates, I want to be able to add the magnitude of those things to the data. We don't do that right now, right? All we do is add X and Y coordinates, but no magnitude. we need to modify our table right now to do that. So that means the original thing we did a couple of weeks ago, not last week, but the week before, when we went into our main, remember, and we were loading something else. We were loading this calculate Vector2D distance controller, and this, the view that we were looking at is the calculate Vector2D distance view. Remember that one? Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to use Scene Builder here. Let's go to Scene Builder. And I'm going to open a project, and I'm going to go to the desktop where we're going to go to Georgian. I'm looking in ICE5, and I'm going to go into the source, main, resources, and inside there, you can see that I have this calculate Vector2D distance Fxml document. That's the one I want to open now. And when I open it up, you're going to see what it looks like. Remember this? This is the first thing we did. When we click calculate, we calculated the distance. That's what we did between these two vectors, vector A and vector B, right? So this is kind of our ending vector 2D, right? Our ending vector 2D, and that was our starting vector 2D. We actually didn't put that in there. It would be nice if we had another column to talk about the magnitude of these two things and then to calculate. Actually, which is really interesting, if you subtract the magnitudes of both vectors, you get the distance. It's really interesting, right? It's just a mathematical property, right? So it'd be really nice if inside of our original old chart here that we had, or this little thing that allows us to add data, right, to the database. Remember that a couple weeks ago? Well, imagine if in here in our chart, and by the way, our chart is limited, this chart, which is a grid pane, right? This grid pane here is only limited to this little part right here. Let's do some modifications. What if, I'm just gonna put it out there to you, what if I took this little grid pane, right? And if I was to, kind of right click on the grid pane, and what I want to do is I want to like fit, I want to fit to the size. Can I do that like I did last time? Can I look there and can I do fit to parent? And the answer is I can't really do that. Here I can modify the grid pane as much as I want, right? But it doesn't really fit to parent, not exactly, right? I could do some things like this, as an example. But remember, we're also in a VBox, right? Where the Vector2D distance is on top. I'm just going to do those changes. That's what it was before. And so if I wanted to add in, one more time. If I wanted to add in a, something in here, that's just the one thing we changed here. There we go. If I wanted to add in a column, right, that's in here, I'd have to add two columns, right? Some kind of separation, the way we have this kind of made. I need to add in a column here, and that column in here would be able to display, the magnitude. So I could do that. It's going to waste time for us because this is just a way of entering data, and I think this is okay, right? This little thing that we had here. But if I wanted to display it, I would display it here. Okay, let's do that. So let's waste some time. So here, what I want to do is I want to add a column, right? So how do I do that? Do you guys remember how to add a column, right, to the grid pane? Well, here it is, right? Grid pane, and then I want to add a column after. Here's a column after the one add in, right here, right, to the grid pane itself. And it'd be nice if the grid pane was inside something else. Right now it's in a VBox, right? It'd be nice if we had the grid pane embedded inside of the other thing that we used before, right? So we had our label, which is on top, this calculate Vector2D distance, and our grid pane here, which has this extra column now. What I want to do is I want to have maybe one more column. We have a column in between like these. This is how we did it anyway. Let's add another column. So we'll go into grid pane and we'll add a column after. There we go. You can see that it pushes everything and squishes everything together. And that's just fine. But we want to kind of move this column in like so. And I want to add a column in here to display the the magnitude. So I could have a label that's in here. That's what I could have. So I grab a label. Let's do that. So control, again, I can go into label and grab that label and put it in here. So there's a label. And I could grab another label and put it in the other spot right here. There's the label. This would be the magnitude that we want. Okay. I could also make a label on the top that says magnitude and forgo this thing altogether, because that is also something I can do, right? So example, if instead of doing it this way, label, it's going to say both magnitude. Makes no sense. I could put magnitude on top and it's just all of them would be magnitude, right? Which is another way to organize things. So let's do that instead. So I could do this. I'm just showing you options, right? And let's do the same thing. If I do add row above, here's a row above, right? It shifts things around, right? So it just changes the location of everything so far. And what we want to do is we want to add a kind of a label up here. So let's add that label up there. Here's a label. And that label up there is going to say something like, if I go to properties, we can change that label to magnitude. This is where it's going to display the magnitude. Again, not the prettiest position, right, of where it's going to be, but at least we can see what the magnitude is. And we need a couple of other labels, one label here and one label here. Instead of using a text field like this, we can use labels to display stuff too, right? So if I grab a label, we can put it here. And we can have another label on the other side over here. And these labels are going to be originally empty. So let's just make them empty. So there's not going to be anything inside of this one. And there's not going to be anything inside of this one. But those labels are going to be there, right? And you can see that 6.1, which is this label, and 6.3, which is this label, are there, but they're just not, there's nothing inside of them. There's no data right now, okay? And I want to make some references so that they compute back inside of our code. Our Fxml document needs to be modified. So we need to go to where it says code, right? And we need to add an FX ID for these two labels. So this would be the magnitude label for the starting vector. So starting magnitude, let's call it that. So starting magnitude, right? And this one would be the ending magnitude. So this is the ending magnitude. Yeah, there we are. We can save that, save. Okay, so starting magnitude, ending magnitude, right? Now remember what we would normally do is if we're making this from scratch, I would go into the view and I would go to show sample, show our sample, and down in here we have a couple of things. We don't need all of it, but I just need these two pieces right here. So private label ending magnitude, private label starting magnitude. Let's copy those two pieces. And if I go back to my calculate Vector2D distance controller, I can pop those in right here. Let's say around line 32 or so. So pop those in. There they are, right? And you can see that they're labels, and we don't know what labels are. Let's add them in. So Alt-Enter. They're Fxml labels. We don't know. We haven't used a label so far, but there they are. So you can see in the import, we just imported an Fxml label control. There it is, right? That's what we had to do because we didn't have them in here. And so we've added a couple of labels, the ending magnitude and the starting magnitude, right? It doesn't really matter how we did it. They did it in alphabetical order here, but it doesn't matter. Those two labels are where we want them. All right then, so when I on calculate button clicked, I don't just want this stuff to be done, right? There's a couple of effects. Here's the first effect, right? One, I want to display the magnitudes inside of the, next to the spinners. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. One of them is maybe I want some kind of, remember we did that whole configure Vector2D spinner thing, where once you enter in the data for the Vector2D spinner, it does some stuff, right? Remember, we kind of take the increment, and we did all this in the utility class. So if I looked at the configure Vector2D spinner, if I go back to the utility class, here's the utility class. And if I was to look there, So remember we have the singleton, and if I scroll down, we have this configure Vector2D spinner. And remember what we did, we took a couple things, the spinner reference, min, max, the default value, and increment value, right? And we added a listener, and the listener was used an observable with an old value and a new value, right? And what we said was, when the old value changed to something else, we would try and parse it. That's what we would try and do, right? Well, here's something that's interesting. If we had a reference to the label, right, as we enter the data, we could get a magnitude kind of popped in there, right? We could do that. So we could modify this spinner to not only take the spinner itself, but some kind of magnitude label. Okay, we could do that. And what are your thoughts on this? Should we do it? Should we modify the spinner to get this and not modify the label when the try catch as we go? We could do that. As we go, we can modify the label, try and pounce out some data right out there. What are your thoughts? First of all, do you understand what I'm trying to do? So here, again, imagine if we're entering data in here. I'm entering X and Y coordinates, and as I enter them, magnitude pops up before I select calculate. All right. I'm just putting it out there. What are your thoughts? Should we do it that way? Let's do it, Daniel says. All right, Daniel. Hey, someone's telling me to do it. That's what I wanted. All right, so if that's going to be the case, then our configure Vector2D spinner is also going to require a label, right? Which we're going to call, and we'll just do an alt enter here as well. And we'll say that this label is going to be our magnitude label, right? That's what we want. Our magnitude label, right, is something that we want to modify when we parse float. If this is successful, if we're able to parse the value and we don't have an exception, then at the same time, what we want to do is we want to take that value and assign it to the label as a string, okay? And we don't want to parse this value twice, right? The floating point value. We don't want to parse the new value. The new value is coming in as a string anyway, right? Well, it's coming in as a double. So this is the default value, the increment value. So what is the new value? So the old value is a string, and the new value is a string. So we don't have to parse anything to put it inside the label. We don't need to do that, right? But we do need this value here. We do need this value here. Whatever this value here, we want to be able to use it, right? Inside of the listener somehow, okay? And this is where we can get some interesting things happening, right? And notice that if we have an exception, right? So we catch any exception and we say the spinner text field, we set text back to the old value if there's a problem. Okay, that's what we're going to do, okay? And we also should do something else with our label, our magnitude label as well. So it's almost like I want to say something like, hey, magnitude label, I want to set text, that's what I want to do, to this new value, whatever the new value is, without any kind of issues. That's what I want to do. But that's not quite right. Well, let's try this first, okay? And then if it's a problem, as an example, I want to say the magnitude label, let's just set text to the old value. That's not true either, okay? I'm just going to put it out there to you. So this is not how it should be. But let's see if we can actually even do this. Save. I want to go back to the project now, and we have issues. It says that we have issues. If I was to go into the utility for this one, it says there are 4 related problems. And the 4 related problems it shows us in the spinners. Okay, so that means inside of this function right here, right, we have the spinner, but we don't have the magnitude label. It's wrong. So what we want is, we want the magnitude label to go in there, and we're going to say that the magnitude label, it really depends on which one we're using, right? Because again, we have the ending magnitude label and the starting magnitude label. That's what we have here, ending and starting. So let's go back and see what's happening. Here's the X1 spinner, and here's the Y1 spinner, right? And here's the magnitude label. Well, that's, it's like these two share a label, and I'm trying to modify the label as I go, but it makes sense. It makes sense because if I change one, there should be an instant change to the magnitude. If I change both, when the last thing I change, the magnitude should change every single time I change either one or the other. So that makes sense, but that means this one must be the same. So this one is going to be for the X1, it's going to be the starting magnitude label, right? And it'll be the same thing for, and actually we'll modify this. Let's refactor this. Refactor rename. Refactor rename. We'll rename this to the starting magnitude label, which is what I want, okay, as opposed to the starting magnitude. Okay, I want that instead. All right. Yes. Yep. Do the refactor. Thank you very much. Yep. And I want to do the same thing with the next one. So I want to kind of do here. And let's put them in all those places for now and change this to the ending magnitude label. So ending magnitude, right? And we'll refactor this one as well. So refactor, rename to ending magnitude label. Oops, label. So we know what they are. We'll say do refactor. Nice. If we make a mistake, like I just did, we can just change that up. There we go. And now you can see that the ending magnitude label will change whether I change the X2 spinner or the Y2 spinner. Either way, it's going to change. All right, well, that's going to be wrong for now. But let's see, does it change anything? What happens? What's going on? Okay. One other thing we have to do is make sure that our scene has those updates. So again, what I want to do is I want to change this. Notice it changed them automatically for us. Take a look at that. Starting magnitude label and ending magnitude label, it actually updated the scene builder for us, which is pretty awesome. All right, good. Let's run this thing and see what happens. So I run it. And originally when we get, this is the wrong one. Let's actually see that thing. For us to see that thing, we have to go back to our project, go to main, and instead of starting with our Vector2D table view, let's start instead with that other thing we started last time with, which was the calculate Vector2D distance. So we'll start typing that in right here. So far, we're just switching things in main to make this work. So calculate Vector2D distance. Okay, that's what we kind of did. Save. And let's run it now. And we should see that new, or that old little thing come up. Yay, right? And if I change this, automatically it changes to whatever it's going to be. If I change one of these things, oh, that's bad. Look at that, how it hid that. That's a change that I have to make in our field, because again, remember our little interface doesn't make sense. But anytime I change one of these things, the magnitude changes, and that's what we want. Okay, so that kind of worked. We do have to modify this because it doesn't quite fit tens and double digits anymore at all. This is a problem with our layout. Okay, so let's do that first. So we discovered a problem with our layout, and what we want to do is we want to kind of do something like this, where we expand our layout a little bit. Okay, save. So that'll at least cover. And remember that we can just be very specific. Instead of just like doing it by eye, we can look at all these spinners. So spinner, 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 spinner. These are all the spinners that I've just highlighted all at once. And on the right, when it comes to properties, as an example, or layout, let's go to layout. Under the layout, it says hgrow and minimum width and maximum width and preferred height. It says use computed size, but we can actually calculate a width and a height. So the height right now is 25. So the min height and max height could always be 25. So min height, we can put in a preferred size, right? And same thing with our max height. Remember, we kind of did this last time, but we messed it around because we moved things around. Max height is max value is preferred size, right? So those are the preferred sizes. And what are the preferred sizes that we have for all those things, right? We could do that. We could also say whatever the min and max values are for those things. So the preferred size, the preferred width and height, we can actually type it in here. So the preferred height would be 25. You can actually put in a value, 25, right? Preferred height. And what about the preferred width? So what is the width value, oops, not the one, that's not what I wanted to do. What is the width value right now of this thing, right? How do I get that information? Is there a place here, you know, that I have for the width? And I mean, I have the width. Here's the height, but the width doesn't show me anything. It doesn't say a width type. I can put a number in there. Yeah, 1 second, Dia, right? So I could put my preferred width is 50. Could do that, right? So it automatically changes all those, 50. I think it needs to be more than 50. It should be probably something like 100, right? That makes more sense. So 100, my preferred height is 25. My min height is my prefer, I want to use my prefer size, right? So use my prefer size for height. And same thing with width. I want to use my prefer size, right? You can see that that is my width and so prefer width, and use my prefer size. And you can see that I want to use my prefer size for this as well. There we go. So that is what it might look like. So I push that out a little bit, all the way to here, actually, right? That's pretty long for 100. What if I said 50? Okay, that's a little, that fits inside of that area. How about 60, right? And you can see that that kind of pushes the envelope, but it works, right? So 60 is about right, 60 and 25 for these two things, so I can fit everything in that I want, okay? How about this little lonely cell right here, this cell, right? So I mean, I got this column, and it says horizontal alignment left, but I know that this is all going to be something that I want to calculate. I could start it with where it is. Doesn't really matter right now because I have everything inside there. All the labels are going to be aligned this way. Right? That's what it means. Let's save that. So save. I think this is pretty good so far, right? And let's run one more test, and I'll go back and do what Dia asked me to do. So again, go back to this, and then I'll run it, and then hopefully we'll see that the distance is a little better. I can actually do double digits now, which is pretty good. Okay. So you wanted to see the try in the utility class. Well, remember, it's not done yet, but let's take a look there. So in the utility class, let's go back to the utility class itself. Here it is. And inside the utility class for the configure Vector2D spinner, we have this, but this is not what we want, right? We don't want this. What we want is for us to get the value, right? I want to calculate the magnitude for me automatically, right? I haven't added a vector yet. I haven't done that, but I want to pre-calculate what the magnitude is going to be. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to set up here, okay? So we know we have a utility method up here, distance, start and end, right? And we don't know, here's something that I want to talk about. We don't know anything about the ending, right? All I know, all the spinner knows right now, that's why I'm saying, is this the right thing to do here? Is this the right thing to do to change our magnitude label, to put a magnitude label through here? Because the thing is, it doesn't know anything about the X and Y coordinates. I haven't really set up any kind of functionality for this in any way, right? So yeah, it's a nice idea to put it through here, but it may not work, okay? And that's why I said to you that this may not be the right thing to do, okay? I've talked about it, this is an option, but this isn't right. So what else can I do? If this can't work, okay, so I can't do this because there's too much retrofitting to do, right? And for me to do this. This is possible, but I got to pass more stuff in here, and it doesn't make any sense, okay? The more stuff I got to pass into a method, the possibly it's not the right thing to do. So let's go back to that calculate distance controller thing where we have these issues, and let's get rid of this thing. The labels make sense now, but, well, that didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. Okay, so in my initialize method, right, it configures the spinner to add those capabilities. That's what initialize does, right? And then when I modify the spinner, I'm listening for the spinner itself, right, to change. Maybe I need another thing. Maybe I need another, configuration where I kind of have something similar to the utility method that's here, right? When I have my spinner value factory and all this kind of stuff, right? And what I really need to do is some kind of add listener for my text property, right? The text property of my because the text field is exactly what's happening here, right? The text property of my spinner, I want to do the same thing here for each spinner, right? For each spinner. So I pass in the spinner, but I want to pass in both spinners, not just one. Okay, so it's almost like I'm creating a second listener, right? That's an option if I wanted to make that function work that way. Or we could be really super simple. Okay, I'm just putting it out there. Again, lots of options here to do the same things. We can be really super simple. When I press the button, when the button is pressed, this button here, then I just show the data in the fields, which might be the simplest way for what we're doing because we don't want to overcomplicate this. But I'm just talking about it as a developer. Could we do it? Yes, we could. You know, we're not going to do it today because it takes too long and it's eating up a lot of our time. We have other things we need to take care of here other than just getting this first thing done. Okay. So again, we added the floats. We do everything. We've configured them. And then what we do is we say the DB manager instance insert Vector2D point when I click the button. But I don't just want to insert the 2D point. I also want to calculate or display the magnitude. So here, what I can say is after the float value for the X1, Y1, X2, and Y2 spinner is done, this is a perfect place to put the magnitude in there, right? So I can say something like starting magnitude label dot set text. And here is where I want to set the text of the magnitude label to my X1 and Y1, right? Well, I want to calculate the distance. I want to say, hey, utility, I want to go to the instance method and use the distance method, but I want to use this distance method where I calculate the X1, Y1, X2, Y2. And we never used this so far until now, right? That gives me this gives me the actual magnitude, or this actually gives me the distance between these two things right away. That's what we did, well, down here. This is what we did, right, for the points. Well, what I want to do is I want to get the magnitude for X1, Y1, right, from the origin. So this would be something like X1, Y1. Okay, I could do that, right? And I could work really, really hard to get this done. Or here's something else. I could do it right after my point. If Vector2D is a 0.1, then we already have it. It's right here, right? And all I need to do then, before we engage the DB manager, is say something like, hey, 0.1, I want you to use I want to output to the starting magnitude label dot set text. I want to take my 0.1, that thing, and I want to get my magnitude, right? And I want to change this. I want to kind of do my magnitude to string. I want to convert this thing to a string. How do I take a floating point and convert it to a string? We kind of did this before. How do I do that? How do I take a floating point value and convert it to a string? The other way around. Do I just do this? Is this enough? Where I do this. Is that good enough to do it? That's kind of casting. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm casting my magnitude as a string. Well, what's the other way to do it? Is there another way? Parse. Okay. Give me the code, guys. Come on, help me out here, because some of this is you guys exploring with me. It's not just me doing. So what is the other way to do this? You guys said parse, but parse what? Well, the great thing about this is that I could string format right here, right? I could do a string value of, yeah, that's the one. That's what I want, right? So I want the string value of, it's a string method, string dot value of, and I want to get the 0.1 dot get magnitude, and I want to get the value, the string value of that, and kind of output it to the text. That's what I want to do. So this starting label thing, I want to duplicate for 0.2. So here's 0.2. And this is the magnitude of both things. That's what's going to happen. That's what I'm going to put out there to the database manager, right? So that's what I want. And that's nice. That's interesting that I can do this. This will be 0.2, right, to make it nice and even. So 0.2 and 0.1. I haven't added it yet, but I could. It's only on click, right? That's what I'm going to do. And let's just for now, so that it doesn't add things to the database, because we're not ready to add things to the database, let's just do this. Let's just comment these out for now. So I can't add anything to the database, but I want to calculate the results and all that stuff. These two things will actually connect to the database and add those 2 points to the database. We don't want to do that yet, right? So let's start it. Let's start that thing up again and see if it works. Can I get the magnitude of those things out there at least? So if I type in those two things, let's say 10 and 20, right? And 30, 40. Here's 30, 40. Let's say 30, 45, like this, right? And if I click calculate, it tells me the magnitude. Oh man, it did 1. Why? Because, well, I messed up. I put in starting magnitude from both. This would be ending magnitude. There it is. Ending magnitude label. Let's try this again. So again, I want to do 1020. Let's say 1025, just make it different. And then 30, 45, right? And click calculate, and it says, here's the magnitude of this, and here's the magnitude of that. Okay, so this is the magnitude of the ending vector. And notice the difference. Look at this. This is, again, remember I talked about mathematically what this is? 54 minus 26, right? There it is. There's the distance. So it's almost like I can calculate the distance by subtracting the magnitudes, which makes sense, mathematically. But this tells us what the magnitude is going to be, and these magnitudes are going to actually be put into the database. This is what I want to do. Okay, this is what's this thing is going to happen. Okay, nice, excellent. Now, our insert Vector2D does not insert magnitudes. Let's modify the insert Vector2D to do this. Okay, so again, let's put this up on GitHub, what we have right now, because what we've done is we've done a get magnitude method. We've added the magnitude method, to the Vector2D class. Okay, we haven't done that before. Again, looking up on GitHub, if you refresh, right, you can see that it says modify Vector2D to include a computer property magnitude. We did that already, okay? But what else did we just do? We modified our view, right? Our calculate Vector2D distance controller, and the calculate Vector2D distance view, we modified the view to show the magnitude. So we'll say git add dot, git commit -m, say modified, calculate Vector2D distance view to include magnitude. Really long, probably too long for what we want to do. Click push. All right, there we go. So now it's pushed up there. Let's fix the insert Vector2D and you can tell me what to do. So let's go and look at the DB manager first. Here's the DB manager. And in the DB manager, we have this singleton area, which we're going to duplicate in a bit. And down here, we have this insert Vector2D. But the insert Vector2D, it says the SQL string says insert into vectors X and Y. What do I need to do to my SQL string here to make it so that I can also enter magnitude? How do I modify this? What are your thoughts, guys? Again, I know how to do it, but I want you guys to help. What do we do? I want to take this and modify this so that it works. How do I insert stuff with this DB manager? So Daniel says add magnitude after Y. Okay, so we can say magnitude. Magnitude has to be spelled magnitude, like this. What else? Is that the only thing we need to do, Daniel? Right here? And he says add another question mark. Absolutely, because the question mark is a placeholder for what we're going to be injecting. So now this is the new SQL statement, right? However, we're not done yet. What else do we need to do in this thing in order for us to insert, the magnitude in the database? What's the next part? Maybe someone else other than Daniel can take a look at what we need to do here, right? Giovanni says set the third parameter. Awesome, excellent. So again, statement.setFloat, right? Because it's a float, parameter 3, and we want to use a Vector2D, right? Dot get magnitude. Look at that. We actually have that method. It comes right from our model. our vector model, right? And then we set the magnitude, we get all those things, and this is it. We're good to go, right? We got nothing else to do. It sets up the magnitude and inserts our Vector2D, including magnitude, up online now, okay, which is a beautiful thing. So that's all we have to do to modify this, okay? Let's test it by going back into our calculate vector distance controller here and putting these back in, okay? So now when we add our points, point 1 and point 2, this method from the DB manager not only inserts the points, but also inserts the magnitude into the database, okay? We didn't do distance. That's not something we've done. But the magnitude definitely goes into the database. Okay, cool. Let's test this and see if it's cool. And we'll watch changes here inside of our database when we add our new data points. Okay, let's try this out. So run. And let's decide on some new points. We have right now a big bit of a spread all over the place. Let's add in something like 25, 25, and 45, minus 45, something like that, okay? So just to test with, so 25, 25, oops, 25, and 45. I'm just clicking it up and clicking it down, minus 45, and then click calculate. And we have our magnitudes, and we can see that, oh, wait, the distance between these 2 points is 72. Why? Because it passes through the origin because of this little puppy right here, minus 45. So it's not exactly what we thought it would be. It's kind of like computing the magnitude is right, but we can't really subtract the magnitudes to get this exactly. 72.8011 is what we want for the distance, but the magnitudes for the origin are probably correct. Let's take a look and see what it did up on our database. And if I was to refresh, you can see now I have those extra 2 rows with the magnitude that's there. Okay, there it is. There's that extra data. Okay, so that worked. That worked. However, we do have a problem. What about when I reset? Reset does not reset the magnitude. Reset only resets this part. The magnitude stays. We want to reset that stuff too. That's a simple change we're going to do right now inside of the calculate Vector2D controller method. This one. So in the reset button clicked event, what we want to do is the exact same thing. We want to, there's the result text field clear. We want to do something similar to the labels. So we want to say something like the labels, which is the starting magnitude label, right? We can't do a clear, but we can't do a set text to nothing. That we can do, right? That's kind of a clear. And we'll do the same thing with the ending magnitude label, that set text, and we'll set it to nothing as well. So that will clear it up as well. So that fixes our issue. And now let's go into our terminal and we'll put that up on GitHub. So git commit -m, and we'll say added method or modified, we'll say modified DB manager to push magnitude to the database. Git push. Okay, that's kind of our preliminary. This is just getting going. This is warming up, guys. That's what we're doing right here. Okay, and now for our last trick, is let's go to main and let's switch back to our table view controller, right? Because maybe we want to see the table view. This is just a way of entering data, and we wanted to test the way data has been entered. So what we want to see is we want to look at the Vector2D table view controller, which is the Vector2D-tableview.fxml. So Vector2D, right? Table view. .fxml. That's what we changed the loader to. The loader loads up that resource instead of the other one. And now if I press play, we should see the new data table if we didn't have any issues. And there we have it. We have more data. We have 13 rows of data here in our column. You can see if I expand this, I have more room for data, and it's also expandable. I can move this around or whatever. But there's our data, and you can see the new data is right here. But man, I don't see the magnitude in here at all, right? We want to show the magnitude here too. Oh man, that needs to be changed too. So let's modify that. So inside here, we've loaded this. We don't need this anymore. Let's close this off. So close, right? Close window. And I want to open up another, I want to open the scene manager, the scene builder again. And I'm going to open a project. I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to go to Georgian College, go in there, go to ICE 5, and I'm going to go into resources. And I'm just going to modify the Vector2D table view so I can see the magnitude. Okay, so right now I don't see magnitude, right, as an example. And we want to modify this table so we add another column for magnitude. Let's do that. So right click on this column right here, this column. If I right click, notice what it says duplicate is what I can do. So now we have two Y's. Well, that doesn't make sense. So this one won't be the Y column anymore. This will be the magnitude column. Right, there's the magnitude column. And just like we've done before in code, we should probably name it the magnitude column. Magnitude column, right? Save. So we need that. That's the new column we're going to add in, magnitude column. This is where it's going to come into play, right, for the magnitude. And this is inside of our table view, okay? Magnitude is going to be displayed right here, but we don't have a connector inside of the Vector2D table view controller. This is the Vector2D Fxml file that we just saved, okay? So we have to go back into IntelliJ, into the Vector2 table view controller, and let's think about how we're going to enter the data for the magnitude. Well, we need the column. So we need to make that column happen. Just like we had our table column for X column and Y column, we're just going to copy paste the last one. And let's call this the magnitude column. Magnitude column. That's what we called it, right? And it's still a Vector2D float. Okay, so we have that. And down in here, inside of our initialize statement, we have the following. We have set cell value factory for ID, the X and Y. Oh man, all we need to do is do this next one. We're just going to copy paste. Copy paste. This will be the magnitude column, right? And this will be, it'll say magnitude. Okay. Does this make sense, what we just did? So magnitude column, remember that magnitude itself, ID, X, and Y in magnitude, they are based on the getters of our model, right? So if the model class, which is our Vector2D, has a get magnitude or a get X or a get Y, it computes. And that's why we call this thing get magnitude. If we called it something else, then what would happen is our inside of our Vector2D table view controller right here, this part, it would not show the data. So the only thing we did was we added a new column. It's a table column that we called magnitude column. Make sure that this matches with what it says here. So magnitude itself should be the magnitude column. Spell it whatever way you like, whether lowercase or uppercase, but it's got to be that name. We have to save this, make sure it's saved, so you can see that there's nothing that we have to save here. And if you were to test this, if you were to go to the show sample skeleton, you would exactly see that there would be a magnitude column that you'd put in. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it's at the top or the bottom. You have to declare it somewhere, okay? And then all we did was we took that same thing, a Vector2D, which is the type, and the float for the column type, and that's what we're going to do here. And if I was to run this thing now, if we did everything correctly, we should see all three columns. Look at that. So three data columns now. Yeah, so the only thing we modified here is this one, actually there's two lines. One line is we added in the magnitude column, where we talked about that in the Fxml document in the scene builder, and we added this one line right here. Okay, let's put this up on GitHub because now we've kind of completed the first part, which is our setup for everything we're doing tonight. So git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say modified the table view. We'll say table view scene to include magnitude. I know we did a couple changes there, but this is okay. Okay, questions. Are you confused? Are you happy? Are you getting this? What are your thoughts? because I think it's important for you guys to be on the same page as me when it comes to what we're doing here. Everyone okay? Okay. So we're sitting around 1730, and the next piece is all the new stuff that we're going to add in. Let's take 10 minutes. So 740 we'll come back, and then we'll do the second piece. And the second piece is we're going to add a chart view to this thing. Actually, let's do one more thing before we take a break. Let's set up the chart view before we go. So let's do that. So again, I'm going to go here into this, and let's close this off, right? And just like we normally do, where I'd like to start off is just like we have our Vector2D table view controller, I want to add a brand new Java class, which is our Vector2D, and we'll call this chart view controller. Okay, that's the controller name. It's going to be empty because we're going to replace this whole class with our skeleton, right? And here in the I want to add a brand new Fxml document. Let's do that. So here's our Fxml file. And the Fxml file is going to be the same kind of structure, Vector2D dash, and then we're going to call this chart view.fxml. Okay, that's what we're going to do. There it is. This chart view fxml, this thing here, has to connect to our chart view controller. So make sure that it's correct. So it's again, Vector2D chart view controller. That's got to be spelled there. So that is what we need to do there. And once we have those two things, the chart view fxml and the chart view controller, this is a good start. And what we want, of course, is for the main, instead of it loading our table view, let's work with our chart view for now. Here's our chart view. Save. And then what I want is for our scene builder to load up that chart view where we can work together. So I'm going to click Open Project. I'm going to Desktop. I'm going to go to Georgian. I'm going to go to COMP1011 and kind of hook into that main resources chart view. This is where that's going to go. Let's open that up. And you can see a blank document like this. Okay, this is where we're going to stop, all right? Because this is where we're going to continue with what we're doing after the break. Okay, so save that, please. Save this. And you can see that what it did was not much because chart view is the exact same as what it was because we didn't do anything, all right? But we started off with an anchor pane and we have a chart view. So, and if I run this locally now, it should also just bring up this empty document that looks like this. Okay, that's what it looks like. So that's what's going to happen inside of IntelliJ. All right, let's put this up on GitHub and take a short break. So again, git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say created chart view stubs, which we kind of did. Git push. Stubs means they're just like placeholders right now for our chart view, and we've kind of set it up as the main scene. Let's stop recording now, and again, we'll come back around 7:40-ish and start the next one. Any questions before we take a short